Suzi and Kat coming to you from South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, day 5 of a 5-day festival.
We're done. It's the end.
It's almost the end. We're going to give you a quick overview of today's program. I went to a couple of sessions. I didn't get to a whole lot today, but the last day is usually a little bit slower, and by this time your brain's pretty full.
We're slower. The program's still just as full. We've just slowed down a little. Yeah, what did you say?
So I saw. Okay, so the keynote today was a man named Astro Teller. He's with Google X, which is Google's kind of secret facility where they're creating new things like driverless cars. They're not so secret.
Experimental.
They created Google Glass. They're working on an airborne wind turbine. Really fascinating guy.
Oh, wasn't he awesome? And I mean, he has a background as an entrepreneur. He's been doing his own thing before he joined Google. What I really liked about Astro was that he was talking about they measure success by the number of times they fail. And in fact, he said at one point, it's indicative of how we play at Google X that if we haven't failed many times in a project, then on one hand, yeah, we're a little bit excited, but we're actually more disappointed that we haven't actually had those failures. So it was all about failing fast.
One of the examples he gave was with Google Glass. He said the mistake that they made was that they went out to the public as though it was a final product rather than a prototype. And so then they were slammed because people were finding fault in it. So he was talking about prototype your product as quickly as possible, get it out there, let people tell you what's not working.
Exactly. And be willing to experiment. I think, one of the things that was one of the subtle messages actually in terms of the Google Glass was it was an experiment. It was never necessarily meant to be a product that was going to go to market. This was, let's find out this kind of wearables. And so they've learned a lot around wearables and privacy concerns that people have and all that kind of stuff that will inform the next generation of wearables and glass and whatever that's going to look like. But it was an experiment. It wasn't meant to be a product research concept.
They're a lot further developed on the driverless cars than I actually knew about until today, and it's fascinating, and it has been a theme through the festival. We'll talk more about themes in our wrap-up episode. But back on the subject of failure, he said failing doesn't have to mean not succeeding. Look at what you've learned. A mistake-free progress environment doesn't exist. I loved that line. Did you hear him say that? A mistake-free environment in which there's progress doesn't actually exist. So he said, people talk about failing fast, but they actually don't allow themselves to fail nearly enough.
He also said too that it's actually it's very cheap to fail early, but very expensive to fail at the end of your journey. So he said, just fail, just keep failing, keep making the mistakes and learn from them.
And I know as an entrepreneur, I don't really want to fail. I don't want my customers to think I failed. I don't want my staff to think I failed. I don't want to think I failed. And yet he's saying that you're missing out on opportunities to learn when you're not allowing yourself to bomb at something. And he talked about moonshots, which I love that term. Of course, it relates to the Apollo. But he's talking about making creative, productive failures, which is a totally different way, again, to think about making mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole premise behind Google X is that they are taking moonshots. We want to jump 10 times further ahead of where we could be. And, it's influenced by the Apollo missions in terms of actually putting man on the moon. It was just a stunning visionary. Another one of those people that you get to see at South by that you just sit there in awe of their thinking style. And for me, anyway, I actually wonder, wow, what would happen if I thought just that little bit bigger? Still won't be as big as how they think, whether it's an Elon Musk or a Martine Roseblatt or a Astro Teller. But what would happen if I just thought that much bigger?
Hats off to the people at South by. Once again, the keynotes have all been fantastic. Now, this afternoon, there was a session called Breaking the News in the Age of Snapchat. And on the panel was Dan Rather, who's been a news anchor for a million years. He's an icon, no, but at least 44 years. And also Dan Pfeiffer, who's the senior advisor at the White House. And they were talking about reporters, the art of reporting, the future of reporting, the future of media. And they were talking about Obama, because he's probably been the first president that I remember who's been on late night shows, he's been on BuzzFeed, he's created content that specifically goes outside of the 4 major networks. And Pfeiffer was saying that did they not do that, and if they stuck to the major channels, media channels, they would miss a whole generation of people.
Yeah, look, I found that a really fascinating conversation because as Rather correctly pointed out there is a big distinction between news, and he said news is not the press release that the White House puts out. The news is what happens after the press release. It's what happens after the event. But it was also a fascinating conversation, I think, about how we as a population have actually merged and converged this idea of PR and news and content. Pfeiffer, senior White House advisor, we kept talking about how he sees very much their role in the White House to be a content creation machine. I haven't reconciled that yet, because it does then cloud, well, what is the information? How do I know, particularly if there's not strong enough investigative journalism going on, how do I know what's news versus propaganda?
And there was a big conversation, because real investigative journalism, real news reporting is a skill and an art. And just because you publish content doesn't make your information news. But what it means, they said something like, media used to be a fixed menu because only a few people held the power. Well, now it's a buffet. And you, with your content and your expertise, can be that channel for people who want exactly what you have.
Yeah, and then I think the issue then becomes drawing that distinction between news and opinion. There was some lovely conversation around, I've always had an issue with citizen journalism. It's actually not citizen journalism, it's citizen opinion. And so we need to make sure that, I think, as we keep moving forward, that we keep doing the research and we keep getting our information and our opinion and our news from multiple sources.
Did you see anything else today you want to talk about?
I'll quickly touch on actually a really interesting report. A session that I saw this morning by two researchers who pulled together the annual list about the top 20 accelerators in the US. A couple of really interesting things, and I'll post a link to slide notes and etc. to the full report. And I'm not going to mention the top accelerators because they're US based. Interesting thing though was, from an entrepreneurial myth busting perspective, which is one of my key passions, was they have to look at the success rates of the businesses that go into the accelerators. The research has only been being done over the last couple of years, and the average exit is actually 7 to 9 years for a business. That's 7 to 9 years for a startup. But we still, and we do this all the time in Australia, we think that a success rate is exit in 2 or 3 years. It doesn't happen. It's not real. So it was really good insights in terms of the research around the accelerators, what makes them perform really well. It was good education, good mentors, good managing directors. And just some good insights. Our accelerator programs in Australia are doing exactly the same stuff. So that was really exciting to see.
I'm really interested to hear that, because we're so much about education, mentors, as being part of the underpinning of most successes.
Yeah.
And if we add to that what we said earlier about failure and really understanding your customer and things that you'll find in the series that we've done while here at South by Southwest, there's enough little pieces, I think, to help make that longevity in business a little bit easier for people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us here at South by Southwest. We look forward to seeing you in the wrap-up episode, which is coming up real soon. Thanks for joining us.